if you do not have a plan to execute your design sprint, roadmap, anything that you're really working on, it's going to fail.
You're listening to CX Passport, the show about creating great customer experiences with a dash of travel talk. Each episode, we'll talk with our guests about great CX, travel, and just like the best journeys, explore new directions we never anticipated. I'm your host, Rick Denton. I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport. Let's get going. For those of you who have been in a design sprint, I want you to think about the longest it's ever taken. Weeks, probably. Maybe months for some of you. Okay, now visualize how fast you think it could have been. You're probably thinking that you could get it down to a week, maybe a few days, or if you're really bold, a day perhaps. 2 hours. Yep, 2. TWO hours. That's the reality today's guest, Teresa Cain, Director of Product Management, User Experience, and Design for TreviPay, creates in her book, Solving Problems in 2 Hours, How to Brainstorm and Create Solutions with 2-Hour Design Sprints, released back in April of 2023. That is a bold claim, and we will get into the how and why of that claim in today's show. In addition to being an author of guides to design delivery, Teresa leads a team at TreviPay overseeing a staggering $7 billion in payments and shaping the experience for over 100,000 daily users. I can see how innovation, and particularly speedy innovation, would be key to success here. Prior to this, Teresa has an impressive track record with companies like SMG, Service Management Group, NetSmart Technologies, Lexmark, and H&R Block, where she's played pivotal roles in product strategy, mobile solutions, and integrations. As part of her origin story, I'll let you guess what double major Teresa was. I also bet you'll get it wrong. Stay tuned to the show to find out the answer. Teresa, welcome to CX Passport.
Thanks for having me on the show, Rick.
Let's get into this. And we are not going to even use 2 hours to do this one. We're going to get all of your wisdom in a half hour. So we'll go even beyond that 2-hour design sprint. Let's talk about that. Your book, Solving Problems in 2 Hours. It came out earlier this year in April 23. Now, I realize that speed is the obvious answer here, but go deeper than that. Why was a concept of a 2-hour design sprint necessary?
Yeah, no, it's a really great question. And it's one I get asked a lot, if you can imagine. So, really, with the concept of design sprints and design thinking, so I'll kind of rewind a bit. So, if you recall, the concept of design thinking is where you could take months to years solving a process or a problem. And the concept of the design sprint, which was created by Jake Knapp and the team at Google Ventures, was meant to really problem solve in 5 days. And what a lot of organizations really struggled with back when this book came out in 2016 is not every organization really has the bandwidth like Google does to run multiple 5-day design sprints over long periods of time. In addition to that, a lot of organizations really looked at this method as something they could schedule out a year from now. So perhaps they plan in their budget for the following year and they set aside a certain amount of money to bring in a third-party firm. So what was really missing for that process and why I developed this process and why it was needed was really to solve a need for organizations and entrepreneurs to be able to use this method to solve problems quicker and more efficiently. So let's say you have a problem that you need to solve tomorrow. You're able to use this process and effectively bring a solution in with your engineering teams right away.
Yeah. You've used the word effectively in there, and that's the one that I think I want to key off of, because there's a lot of things that can be done really, really quickly, and a lot of times really, really quickly is also in hand with really, really crappy. In fact, we talk about kind of the scrappy way of doing it and that sort of thing, and that has value in and of itself, but there's risks with that speed. And I imagine there are skeptics around the 2 hour. Really, Teresa, 2 hours? Come on. And so I see all those benefits of the faster design sprint. How about some of those risks and both the perception of those risks and the reality of those? How are you overcoming both the perception and the reality of those risks?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I will say, no matter whether you're using a 2-hour design sprint or a 5-day, you're going to have failures. So
Mm.
80% of design sprints, whether it's a 5-day method or 2 hour, are going to fail. And in fact, with this 2 hour process, what it's really meant to focus on is small and medium problems that you're able to use during that 2 hour time period. So you're not going to go take this and, build out a brand new multifaceted website in 2 hours, right? That would be a large
Wow.
complex problem that you probably need to do more than a 5-day design sprint. You should
Right.
probably have a lot more planning involved. So where this process, the sweet spot really is with a 2 hour design sprint, is to really take small or medium problems that your organization is looking to rapidly get feedback on and solve with a collective group of stakeholders to kind of move it to that next step.
This is your captain speaking. I want to thank you for listening to CX Passport today. We've now reached our cruising altitude, so I'll turn that seatbelt sign off. While you're getting comfortable, hit that follow or subscribe button on your favorite podcast app so you'll never miss an episode. Love it if you'd tell a friend about CX Passport, leave a review so others can discover the show as well. Now, sit back and enjoy the rest of the episode.
How, okay, so almost, I don't want to say tactically, because that's perhaps a slightly overused word, but maybe more practically, I'm a company, I've got a myriad of problems, some that feel big, some that feel small, but sometimes I don't necessarily know that size, that scoping. How have you helped companies kind of winnow down to this is the one or the ones that fit this approach?
So ultimately, it's really comes down to the types of customers that you're engaging with and solving with. So when an organization comes to me with a problem, or we have a problem at TreviPay, just to give you a bit of idea here. So we actually have 27 engineering teams. We have a little over 200 in our product and technology org across the globe. So that really means we're not just problem solving small, medium, large problems. We're problem solving with stakeholders all over. And
Yeah.
Australia, we've got offices in the US, Australia, Costa Rica, and so forth. And so, what makes a really great problem for a 2 hour design sprint is something you have a strong demand for that you need to get over the finish line because your customers are asking for it tomorrow, or you want to get a competitive edge, or perhaps you already have a well-faceted backlog that you're managing and you want to grab something on there that you don't quite have a solution for yet, and you need to bring it over that finish line before you go into your next sprint cycle. So there's not really one right or wrong answer to what type of problem is best. It's really what's going to add the most value for your organization if you use this 2 hour design sprint method.
And that doesn't surprise me to hear you say, "Well, Rick, there's no actual checkbox here. It's not this is the shape, this is the size, this is the color of it, this is what automatically fits." That idea of being able to deliver that immediate impact. I imagine there's also a logistic element of this that when it's 2 hours, there's a gathering of those that understand the insights that are required and the solutions or the, I guess, the tactics, the skills, the technology, if you will, to solve those. Is gathering of all of those elements a challenge in the 2 hour sprint, or something that is actually kind of fits very well within that?
That's actually an efficiency that was really created with this process. So, with the number of 5-day design sprints, I had actually whittled those down to a couple days over the years before I had created this process. And part of why this process was created is you can get a group of 20 people together for 2 hours a lot easier than you can for 10 hours or 20 hours or
Yes.
40 hours. And
Right.
especially on this international time zone difference, when you are managing teams for products and solutions across the globe, you need to be able to have a window you could get everyone. And if you're not getting all the right stakeholders, you're going to be missing out on the key components for that solutioning portion.
Hmm.
So that really was the biggest driver, is how can we really use a time period that gets everyone together, collectively engaged, and be able to problem solve for a particular feature or subset going on for your organization.
I'm There's a smile of just the insights that you're sharing, that everyone, but there's a personal smile because I have a current client situation that I think would benefit greatly from what you're describing there, and I've been trying to figure out exactly how can I help communicate what you're describing. You just did it there, so I may be extracting that segment and having that conversation with my client about it's a lot easier to bring people together for a short period than have this extended ongoing element to that. So thank you both for the listeners, but also selfishly for me.
Absolutely.
I mentioned in the intro that you've got, to me at least, a career origin story that is unique. It's not one that I would have expected you to say. And yes, the answer to the trivia question is journalism and English double major. For those of you that got that right, you're lying. And for the rest of you that are honest about it, be surprised by this. And it's amazing that, Teresa, I'm really interested how that made those majors. And of course, aside from the fact that I guarantee those helped in authoring the book, but how do you go from those majors to a focus in design, UX, and overall customer experience?
It's really those sneaky minors, Rick. So, while I was a journalism and English major, my emphasis was actually technical writing and editing. So that means I
Ah,
was editing HTML. And that's actually how I got my first job out of college at H&R Block, which was editing taxcut.com articles in HTML. And so,
okay.
so that's actually really how I got my start in the tech world, and then moved on to SQL and right into product management, and dabbled in some Python and other languages over the years. But really, a really unique experience where I've actually had the opportunity to be in the product and technology space for 16 plus years. So I really got my start right in there, right out of the get go. So.
That is okay. You actually are catching me off guard there because I thought it might be, it teaches me how to think and that I didn't think about the sneaky majors actually. And with two children at college right now, they've got some sneaky majors that I know are going to help them in a similar way going forward. I have to imagine that, in one class when you're studying Proust and Shakespeare, and then you're also then understanding HTML, there had to be some sort of some mental disconnects there. How about taking those worlds together? So you started there and you evolved into where you are today. I'm curious how you see the worlds of design and customer experience weaving together. It seems obvious, and yet there seems to be a tribalism that exists there. How are those two worlds really at their best when they're weaving together?
Yeah, so just kind of circling back to one of my first roles. My first, I when I started at H&R Block, before I got offered a role there, I was actually interning. And my very first internship, I was actually asked to do my taxes and all kinds of different softwares. At the time, TurboTax was kind of coming in the market for H&R Block and
Right.
several others. And so when you think about customer experience, think about all the different tools that you could have a different experience in doing your own taxes, aside from the fact of working with an accountant or going to an H&R Block store or another mechanism. Those are all different experiences targeting different generations and different types of audiences. And so one of the recommendations I had developed at the time was that they should be partnering with universities, for that model. And that was in part because of the experience of how do you really bring a customer along for the journey? Not one that they're just starting when they go out of college, but one, as they further their career, as they perhaps
Mm-hmm.
get married, perhaps have children. And so that's really part of that customer journey when you think about the experiences we have across different products and solutions of how do we really keep that customer interested and coming back for more.
Ooh. And that really kind of hits me as I think about some of those products. I will not name them, but the ones that I've used, how some of them I did start using right as I came out of school. And my gosh, through marriage, through kids, through empty nesting, all of that, the evolution and how those tools have evolved with me and kept me. Well, you want to talk about lifetime value or staying with a customer journey? I don't know that we often think in decades, and yet you're describing that thought of financial software being a decade oriented element of that. I imagine to do that requires, well, understanding the customer, right? That's a key element of customer experience. And I talk a lot, longtime listeners know this. They know that I talk a lot about how I love that the contact center and all of that inbound customer knowledge is just such a source of rich customer insights. And I talk a lot to the contact center folks about how do you leverage that? How do you then communicate that outward? Well, you're on the other side. You're the consumer of this information. And so I get the chance to actually ask a consumer of that information, how are you tapping in to those consumer insights through the contact center and others? How are you succeeding at that? And then what are some of the challenges in unlocking those insights?
So I might have a little bit of a biased answer. So while I am a consumer of that info, I actually got Net Promoter certified 15 years ago with
Okay.
that metrics. So I have actually been along for the NPS and CX journey throughout my entire career. And really, that actually, what you just described is the fundamental of what we should be tapping in the product and technology and user experience teams. And so, with that, and every organization I've actually been at, I've had the opportunity to roll out a net promoter survey, partnering with support and other teams really for that product feedback. So that's really critical. And I've used a number of tools over the years. You obviously saw I worked at Service Management Group, but also Medallia, Qualtrics, Clarabridge,
Hmm.
Salesforce's NPS. So I have rolled out quite a few programs. And how I'm really using that data today at TreviPay and how I have in the past is collectively being able to look and evaluate not just the NPS scores, but what I'm looking at is the verbatims. So, what are the
Hmm.
customers saying? And one of the questions that I put on the NPS survey intentionally is would you be open to participating in a usability study or a design study with our product and UX team? And around 30% of our customers that take the NPS survey and fill that out say yes to that.
Really?
So that's how
Sorry.
I'm using it. Yeah,
That seems
30%.
really high to me. Now, I guess
Yeah.
it's 30% of those that have already opted into a survey.
Right.
Still, what great engagement.
Yeah. Yep. And for B2B, engagement survey scores for B2B, tend to run a little lower. You see them
Yeah.
somewhere around the 7 to 12% range. But again, of that 7 to 12% range, 30% of those taking the survey say, yes, we'd love to do that. And that's exactly how I'm using the data is how do I look at the experiences they have with Net Promoter along with other click metric tools like Amplitude and Google Analytics to see what they're actually clicking on, what they're using, and then what is their experience while using that, on that Net Promoter scale. And from there, I'm able to really help make decisions strategically for our roadmaps and kind of next steps for what we're trying to solve each quarter.
Oh, that's fantastic, Teresa. I love that willingness and that appetite and that interest in gaining that customer insights, and I love taking it to that next level of great. You filled out the survey. By the way, you want to join us in a user experience panel, and that's a brilliant next step of taking that insight a little bit further. Later, I may want to talk to you about how do you convert that to action. We may get to there, but
Yeah.
for now, I want to invite you into the first class lounge. You mentioned some destinations, and Costa Rica sat in my head, but you mentioned some others around the globe as well. And while you may be doing these design sessions remotely, there may be some business travel that you've had or even personal travel. And when you go those long distances, it is nice to stop down in the lounge, especially when you get access to the first class lounge, which you get today. Congratulations. So join me here. We will move quickly here and have a little bit of fun. What is a dream travel location from your past?
Yeah, so I actually just got back from Ireland,
Ooh,
which was amazing, and I did some coastal hikes along there. So that is a dream location, and I will say most of Europe is a dream location. Italy, I try to make back to Italy every couple years since I've got family there. So um,
even better. Okay, which part of Italy?
Verona, Italy. So
Ah, very nice indeed. You said hikes. I'm going to actually double down a little bit on the Ireland part. You said hikes because I'm very interested in hiking and love
yeah.
doing that in the Southwest U.S. What does that look like in Ireland? You talked about these coastal hikes. What is that like?
So here's a fun fact for you. So I was told it was a walk, but I learned that walk over there means hike apparently. So luckily I came prepared with tennis shoes, but no, really it's like a several mile, there's just several miles of these like coastal views where you're kind of walking uphill. There's a particular town I went to, it's called Howth. It's right outside of Dublin, and it's about 45 minutes from Dublin, and you get there and it's this like really quaint fishing town. It's beautiful, and you really climb up this hill and what is actually like 7 miles of coastal hikes
Okay.
around where you're looking at beautiful views of the ocean and so forth. The group I had went with, about half of us kind of took a detour and went to the bar. So didn't quite make it the full hike, but I think we made it about 4 miles, and the others were wish they would have done the route we did. So
Okay, so I kind of like, as much as I love my Arizona desert hikes, your hike there sounds kind of intriguing, especially with the, you know what, I'm done here. I'm going to stop off in the pub. You have given me now a dream travel location I haven't been to yet, but I want to ask you, what is a dream travel location you've not been to yet?
So I think really on my list, especially after just coming back from Europe, which I love, I actually would really love to go over to Australia and New Zealand, which
Hmm.
Trevi Pay actually has offices in Australia. So
Okay.
with COVID, I think I probably would have gone there by now, but COVID disrupted that a little bit. But for me, I think that's probably one of the journeys I'd love to take over to either Australia or New Zealand.
That would be great. And the idea of doing it kind of in conjunction with work where, yeah, you're working, but if you could do sort of the slow travel mode where you're over there, while it's so far for those of us that live here in the US that I'd want to, I haven't been there yet either. It's definitely on the list to spend time there. I don't want to just spend 2 weeks there. If I'm going to travel that far, I want to really immerse. That sounds awesome.
Yeah. I will say I have a coworker that has been with Trevi Pay for over 20 years. He's been there over 40 times
Oh,
to
okay.
Australia. So
Well,
I've got
this is
some
now
work to
just
do to catch up.
yeah, this also has now become a recruiting podcast for TreviPay. Anybody that wants to get into some global travel is going to now start popping in their
Yep.
applications. Unintentional here, but that's a nice little
Perfect. People love it.
little recruiting video. What one of the things I do love about travel, and even when I'm not traveling, is eating, of course. And what is a favorite thing of yours to eat
While traveling or just in general?
in general?
So I will say, so I am Italian, so I can home make my own pasta, cookies, all the above. So I will say, like, I do make a healthier version, than many places you'll find. But I do think for me, really just like going back to pastas and Parmesan
Mm.
are kind of like what's home for me and what I think of my nonna cooking over the years and my mother. So.
I got to stop doing these podcasts in the afternoon, evenings, because now I'm hungry, Teresa, thinking about that good homemade pasta and the cookies. Let's go the other way and stem my hunger. What is something growing up you were forced to eat as a kid, but you hated as a kid?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I mean, it has to be vegetables, right?
I've been
Something you could be attacked.
surprised.
No, I mean, this is kind of a funny story. So we're talking about Italy and Italian food. So I actually went over to Italy when I was a teenager, like young teenager, and I remember there actually are several restaurants there that have like 10 plus course meals over there.
Hmm.
Because and a lot of times you're kind of eating there and you're meant to stay there and enjoy the experience, not just,
Right.
dine in, dine out. And so I remember there was some sort of caviar variety that I was eating over there. And I would say that I wasn't ever forced to eat it, but I learned when I was over there that I would put the food I didn't like in the rolls until one of my cousins figured it out and went to grab a roll, and there was a lot that he found in there. Um,
Uh,
yeah, never
the
pork, but
inventive
probably caviar.
The inventive, well, boy, there's an interesting. I can assure you, no one has answered caviar to that question before. Plenty of vegetables, but caviar's never made the list. And I love the inventive ways that we as kids found ways to hide or dispose of food we didn't wanted. What is going back to travel, closing out the lounge? What is one travel item, not including your phone, not including your passport, that you will not leave home without?
Hand sanitizer. I will say, especially after my last travel trip, I got sneezed on at the airport. So like right full on sneeze.
Oh,
But hand sanitizer couldn't have saved me from that.
Oh, Teresa, I would want to go shower in hand sanitizer after being sneezed on in a global airport. So, yes, I can understand why that would be the one travel item, not including your phone, that you will not leave home without. Now, I've got these oogie feelings thinking about that. So, I'm glad that that is a memory from the past for you. You said something interesting to me when we were talking before the episode. And you mentioned that you've been doing Chat GPT for years. Now, given that most people, and myself included, really first started hearing about ChatGPT as a concept in late 2022, perhaps,
Sure.
I'm really intrigued by someone who says that they've been doing it for years. Tell me more about you and ChatGPT.
Sure. And specifically not OpenAI's ChatGPT, but what I mean by that is I actually have worked on a number of text analytics engines and AI models. And so NLP, or natural language processing, really is a way to decipher large amounts of data and provide an output. And that's something I've worked on at a number of places over the years, especially while I was at Service Management Group. We had built several homegrown text analytics solutions and had some partnerships with others as well. And Service Management Group, if you're not too familiar with, they are a really large CX platform. So in addition to Net Promoter, they process digital surveys really in an omni-channel state of mind.
Hmm.
And so some of those large clients, we were processing billions of pieces of data that were kind of coming in, and we were creating output. And a lot of the output we were creating was action. So when you think of the concept of ChatGPT, in a similar fashion, you were able to input whatever you want into there. We're talking about pizza and pasta. Let's say you are typing in, tell me more about pasta, and you're able to kind of have this summary of data kind of come out of that. Similarly, at TreviPay, we've looked at a couple of different, predictive models of how can we really predict what's going on in the industry with payments and invoices and so forth. And so what I find really fun about ChatGPT is, while this is a interface available now to the public, a lot of organizations were already utilizing these methods internally. And I haven't even touched on the government. The government has had their own systems internally that they've used.
Yeah.
I've partnered with a couple organizations in the past that I've worked for. And so really, I think it's great. I think there is a lot of use that is being made out of ChatGPT. But one of the things about ChatGPT is it is a model that has both supervised and unsupervised learning, which means that right now it's getting fed a lot of different data, and there is probably someone there manually having to go through and decide whether that data is true or false. So that would
Mm.
be one of the complications that I see about ChatGPT, is we have to be careful about what we're using from it, what we're claiming that we're using that data for, how we're using it, and how we're really claiming it, especially with some executive orders about to be in play stating
Yeah.
whether or not you use AI for your picture, for your writing, anything. That's a really big piece of a change that's kind of come to this big phenomenon of AI.
And the answer that you provided there shows someone that has been working with it, and even I have found myself casually using phrases, and I think many folks do, right? It's the Xerox of copiers. We say Chat GPT, but then we mean AI, but actually we don't mean AI. We mean large language models, or what all the specific things that those of us that are relatively new to this area are still getting our lexicon wrapped around it. And so to hear you describe that, and then I'm kind of curious, maybe off camera, we'll talk about some of those government things that that you seem to know about, that has us both intrigued and perhaps fearful. But no, actually, that there's a ton that we are gaining out of this, even in the customer experience space and other things, and how we are able to leverage those tools to improve experience. And that's a theme that you said in there. I heard convert to action. And I'd like to close us out today with, because everything that we sort of talked about, even a design sprint, if you've done it for 2 hours, but it doesn't manifest in action, if you understand the customer insight from the contact center and it doesn't manifest into action, or if you have the user experience, whatever that looks like, if it doesn't manifest to action, well, then it's worthless. Great. You got a nice dashboard, yip-de-doo. So how are you taking all those customer insights, whether it's a design sprint, whether it's the contact center, whatever the input is, how are you converting that into action?
Yeah, so I agree 100%. So I think if you do not have a plan to execute your design sprint, roadmap, anything that you're really working on, it's going to fail. And I think that's something that a lot of organizations struggle with, and kind of why the concept of 2-hour design sprints also came to fruition. Considering that 1 in 5 businesses, closes every year,
Yeah.
in the U.S. alone. And so really how I go about executing, any of those plans, whether that's a 2-hour design sprint or roadmap or different or putting something into Chat GPT, I'm kidding. Uh, how I really go about that is, the biggest way is to really delegate and make sure who has ownership of the action. And that's really the biggest failure point that I see with organizations is lack of ownership of who will execute on the items coming out of any meeting, not just meetings, design sprints, or roadmap executions, driving in features. And so really good delegation is important. I think putting a plan of how you will follow through with that, and then really putting in stringent deadlines and follow up is important as well. So that's really the success to making sure you execute that. And another key item is what I wanted to say is making sure that you have stakeholder buy-in. Stakeholder buy-in is what really allows you to bring your projects over the finish line for when you execute it, and to continue to have that buy-in that pays dividends from there on as your champions.
There's a lot woven into there. I heard two big themes, and that is a plan, right? To actually intend to do something, not just have a pretty scorecard, but a plan and a process and the like, and who's going to do it, and the delegation associated with it, and the stakeholders. Those two themes heard loud and clear, along with some minor themes in there as well. And I think that's incredibly valuable, because if we haven't created tangible business value out of all of this customer work, whichever flavor of customer work we're describing, then what's the point?
Right.
And creating that tangible business value is so important. Well, Teresa, it's been a real delight. And I imagine others might want to know a little bit more about you, a little bit more about your approach to design, to 2-hour design. How can folks get in touch to learn more, and where can they get the book? All of those sorts of things. And I'll get that in the show notes.
Sure. The book is on Amazon.com, paperback. There's also an ebook special going on right now as well. Also learn more info at 2hourdesignsprints.com, or follow me on Twitter at design with T Cain, or connecting with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. And all of that is in the show notes. Scroll down. You don't have to write anything down. Just click the links, and you will go right there to either get the book or connect with Teresa. Teresa, I really did learn a ton today. Enjoyed it, all the way from exploring even the concept of a 2-hour design sprint, the idea of weaving into how that converts into action and translating that, and also learning that at some point, I want to find a way to come where you are and enjoy some of that homemade pasta, because that just sounds absolutely spectacular. Teresa, it has been an absolute joy for me to have you on the episode today. I've enjoyed it thoroughly. Teresa, thank you for being on CX Passport.
Thanks for having me, Rick. I've enjoyed it as well.
Thanks for joining us this week on CX Passport. If you like today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. Click subscribe on the CX Passport YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app. Next, leave a comment below the video or a review in your favorite podcast app so others can find and enjoy CX Passport too. Then head over to cxpassport.com for show notes and resources that can help you create tangible business results by delivering great customer experience. Until next time, I'm Rick Denton, and I believe the best meals are served outside and require a passport.